In Santa Clara, when draft week starts heating up, there is no such thing as a small story. Everything feels like a clue. Everything feels like pressure. Everything turns into a real debate for a team that should be thinking about February, not just September. And today, this thing is loaded. A meeting with a ball-hawking defender, a possible shockwave on the market, a battle-tested veteran hovering around contenders, and mock drafts pushing even harder on a delicate offensive line issue. Hit that like button right now and stay with me, because what's taking shape here deserves to be read like a big-time team. Now lock in on this, because a lot of people see this kind of pre-draft meeting and think it's just front office paperwork. It's not. When the 49ers sit down to evaluate a name like Lewis Moore, this is not just about adding depth. This is about ball skills, instincts, and real production for a defense that needs to get back to hurting teams at the right time. And that matters. San Francisco finished last season with just 6 interceptions as a team. Lewis Moore had 6 picks by himself in 2025. That does not force anybody to call him a high pick, but it absolutely forces serious fans to respect the message. And there's more to it than that. Moore does not come from one of those clean, polished paths the draft world loves to package up. He went through Navarro Community College, Ole Miss, and Indiana. He moved around, worked, matured, stacked experience, and finished his college career with 215 tackles, 9 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles, and a steady presence around the football. That kind of resume does not scream glamour. It screams competitiveness. It screams survival. It screams a player who had to earn everything the hard way, and a team trying to get its defense back to being nasty should know exactly how to value that profile. Of course, there is a debate here. His age is going to bother a lot of people. Walking into camp as a 25-year-old rookie makes analysts slide him toward the back end of the draft, maybe the 7th round, maybe even out of it. But here's the question I'd throw right back. Is a contender hunting for birth certificates? Or is it hunting for players who see the play, attack the ball, and understand chaos? Because on a team trying to win now, maturity matters too. And a day 3 safety who shows up ready to compete, hit, and take the ball away can be worth a whole lot more than a raw prospect getting sold off pure frame and upside. That's why I'm not treating this meeting like a footnote. I'm treating it like a sign of mindset. The 49ers are looking at the secondary with urgency, and they should be. A defense that wants to intimidate again has to get its opportunism back, and whether people like it or not, Lewis Moore belongs in that conversation. And now this jumps to another level, because this is not about a hidden draft piece anymore. This is a big name, a heavy name, a name that changes the temperature of a defensive front the second he becomes available. Dexter Lawrence wanting out of the Giants shakes the market for one simple reason. Players built like that do not come around with the door cracked open every day. And when they do, a real contender has to at least measure the damage a move like that could do to the rest of the NFC. Yeah, his 2025 season was below the standard a lot of people expected. He had 31 tackles and just half a sack, which is cold production for a guy who had exploded for 9 sacks in only 12 games the year before. But this is exactly where I refuse lazy analysis. Dominant players do not just forget how to dominate overnight. Sometimes the situation falls apart, the defense slips, the environment gets heavy, the contract talks stall, and the production drops right with it. And now the report out of New York is that talks have stalled. The contract has become a problem, and the desire to leave has picked up real steam. That is not random noise. That is a serious crack in the wall. So the question for Santa Clara is simple. If a talent like this really hits the trade market, are the 49ers supposed to act like they didn't see it? I don't think so. I think a team with Super Bowl ambitions cannot be scared to think big when a defender like this is out there. A guy who can collapse the pocket, eat double teams, and bring violence back to the middle of the line. And I'm not even talking about some reckless fantasy. I'm talking about contender logic. San Francisco knows a dominant defense is not built with just solid names. It is built with players who force offenses to change the game plan. Now obviously this is not a video game. The contract matters. The trade price would matter too. Lawrence still has 2 years left on his deal, and according to Paul Schwartz, he wants a lot more money. So this is not just a football conversation. It's financial. It's structural. It's about choosing your window. But that is exactly the kind of decision that separates aggressive franchises from comfortable ones. If the Giants are really stuck in a hard impasse, somebody is going to push hard. And if the 49ers see themselves the way this fan base sees them, as a team built to fight at the top, this is exactly the kind of situation that deserves full attention. Because average players are always out there. Interior force with a track record of wrecking games is not. The third story today is one of those that splits the room instantly. And that is exactly why it deserves serious contender-level attention. Bobby Wagner is still sitting on the market this deep into the offseason. He still wants to play in 2026, and that alone puts his name right in the middle of any real conversation about playoff teams. Not because the 49ers are desperate at linebacker. The tension here comes from the opposite. On paper, that room looks pretty stable. Fred Warner is still the brain and heartbeat of this defense. Dre Greenlaw is back on a one-year deal. Luke Gifford and other depth pieces round out a group that, at first glance, does not look like it needs emergency help. But January football is not built off a lazy April read. And that is where Wagner gets interesting. He makes more sense when you stop thinking about basic need and start thinking about playoff insulation, about battle-tested edge, about having enough weight in the room to survive a long season. Because Bobby Wagner is not just another veteran looking for a jersey. We are talking about a player with command, instant recognition, locker room gravity, and the ability to settle everybody around him. Even if he is no longer at the absolute peak of earlier years, he is still widely seen as a productive run defender and a presence who can stabilize a unit. For a team trying to bring back physical authority and get to the stretch run intact, that kind of addition is never meaningless. Sometimes the impact is not in the September headline. Sometimes it shows up on 3rd and 1 in January, when somebody has to get everybody lined up before the snap. And that is why the rumor has juice, even without a strong public report tying him to San Francisco right now. The fit comes more from roster logic and franchise timing than from any real smoke out of the building. But let's be honest, that is exactly how a lot of contender moves start to build momentum. The draft passes, the market resets, an injury pops up, a bargain shifts, a veteran sees the right path to chase a ring. And suddenly what felt like a clean fit on paper turns into a real decision. If the 49ers decide they want one more heavy voice on defense, one more layer of security, one more presence to harden the group against the run and in pressure moments, Wagner becomes impossible to ignore. Not because linebacker is the biggest hole on the roster, but because championship rosters are not built only by plugging holes. Sometimes they get stronger by adding one piece that raises the mental and physical level of everybody else. And that kind of move, if it happens in Santa Clara, would not come from panic. It would come from ambition. And now we get to the point where the draft stops feeling like a guessing game and starts looking like a mirror for what's really bothering Santa Clara. Because when multiple mock drafts keep pushing the same kind of answer toward the 49ers, that is not random. The discussion around pick 27 is screaming something this fanbase already feels, even if people do not want to stare it in the face. It is time to seriously think about life after Trent Williams. And the longer that contract situation stays stuck, with Trent set to turn 38 in July, the less room there is for sentiment, and the more room there is for hard planning. That's why Caleb Lomu keeps getting tied to San Francisco. Chad Reuter from NFL.com had the Utah tackle going to the Niners in round 1 of his 7-round mock. Jared Dubin from CBS Sports went the same direction in his latest first-round mock. And when different evaluators land on the same idea, the message gets loud. A lot of people outside the building are reading the 49ers as a team that cannot keep putting off the succession plan on the left side. Not because Trent stopped being great, exactly because he still is. Smart franchises build the bridge before the drop-off hits. But the story does not stop with Lomu, and that is where this thing gets even more interesting. Jacob Kamenker from USA Today sees Cassius Howell as the likely pick, betting on a more aggressive answer for the pass rush after a weak pressure rate last season. As an alternative, he points to Max Ihenacher, another tackle viewed as raw but talented with real developmental upside. And then he throws in Emmanuel Pregnon as a dark horse, someone who could step in as a plug-and-play left guard. Look at the message there. Even when the names change, the trenches still control the conversation. That says a lot about where this franchise is right now. Mock drafts can miss on the name, the order, the round, sure, that is part of the game. But the consistency in these projections puts the real 49ers conflict right out in the open. Protect Brock Purdy, preserve the physical identity, and decide whether the first punch in this draft goes toward the future of the offensive line or the immediate hunger for more pressure on defense. And I'll say it straight, I actually like when a contender is forced to choose between two real priorities, because that means the discussion is already operating at a high level. So I want to hear where the fan base stands in the comments. If the board falls the way these mocks are hinting, are you taking a tackle and planning for continuity? Or are you pounding the table for edge and telling this defense to start scaring quarterbacks again from week 1? At the end of the day, what stands out to me most in this whole batch of news is not just one specific name. It's the posture. The 49ers are looking for takeaways in the secondary, They are tracking the market in case an elite piece shakes loose. They are weighing proven veteran leadership, and they are being pushed to deal with a massive offensive line question. That is how a franchise behaves when it knows exactly where it stands. And where it stands is simple, under the pressure of a team that cannot afford to waste a championship window. If you feel like Santa Clara needs to come out of this draft tougher, sharper, and more dangerous, subscribe to the channel and stay with me, because this final stretch is going to be absolute fire.